Welcome to panel 4. We're going to discuss about personnel services. I'm joining here with Laura Rainey. She is the acting director for financial and IT audit with the Office of Inspector General at the National Science Foundation. She also the agency National Single Audit Coordinator, and most importantly for today's subject, she is the manager of the pilot projects that we're going to talk about on effort reporting. So let me introduce the subject a little bit. Personnel services are the majority of costs on most grants. Particularly on research grants, they can account to up to 80% of the entire total cost. Documenting these costs is important for accountability, but grantees have many times cited that documentation requirement of effort is very cumbersome and add to admin burden in managing of projects. On the other hand, many audits also reveal that there are weaknesses in internal control that have resulted in material audit findings related to the documentation of salaries and wage. The Uniform Guidance Section 200-430 provide new guidelines for documenting personnel services by eliminating the examples that was in A21 before, relying each 10 entity strong internal control for accountability of personnel costs. The new guideline provide opportunity and flexibility for grantee to review his system for documenting personnel services.
Well, Gil, thank you for having me here. One of the myths one of the things that we've heard as we've gone out and done talks and done training about the uniform guidance is that all grantees need to completely revamp their personnel, their time certification service systems.
So that myth is not true. The answer emphatically no, that is not true with the new guidance. However, every grantee organization, the same with the whole implementation of new guidance, must take a look at what the new guidance now and compare with their old, with their old system. Mm-hmm. In many times, they're gonna find that they have enough internal controls, to comply with the new guidance. But it's not required for every organization to redesign their whole system. However, this is an opportunity. So for example, nonprofit or state, local, tribal government, they have an opportunity to take a look at what they are requirement now compared to what they have done before. Mm-hmm. For example, in the past, they have to do a monthly after the fact certification system. That is not a requirement anymore. So there are opportunity, for designing a nouveau system. And this is here, we're going to talk about one of the nouveau pilot system for documenting salary and wage. So with that, Laura, mm-hmm. I know you were the managers of the audit of the pilot projects mm-hmm. on effort reporting at 4 universities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The Federal Demonstration Project, or FDP, initiated a pilot at 4 universities: George Mason University in Virginia, Michigan Tech University, and 2 of the University of California schools at Irvine and Riverside. And the concept behind the FDP project was that effort certification would be revamped to look at award-specific certification versus personnel specific certification, and it looked at costs versus activity. So the annual certifications that were performed were documenting the labor hours for all of the employees that worked on an individual award. So it was a percentage of salary that was being documented as opposed to a percentage of activity. When the certifications, when the time came due, the principal investigator or the PI would make one certification for each award that he or she was in charge of, which definitely reduced the burden at the schools, because if a principal investigator has 3 awards but 30 grad students working for him or her, under the old system, they would need to certify 30 different people. Under the new system, they would certify all of those 30 people, but they would do it on the 3 awards. There were only 3 certifications that needed to be made each year. The way that the internal controls were set up under the pilot was to support the annual certifications through the use of reconciliations throughout the year of the budget to actual costs. So for example, on a monthly or a bi-monthly basis, the PI would sit down and look at the costs that had been incurred to that point on the award and measure it against what they expected to incur and could make adjustments accordingly. and then when they got to the end of the year, the certifications would be supported.
Okay, so your team have taken a look at 2 universities, HHS, Department of Health and Human Services is taking a look at 2 other universities.
Correct.
I understand that your team has completed your review of those 2 pilots at George Mason and Michigan Tech.
Correct.
And the reports are available?
They are available. The web links will be posted with the other information on the COFAR website for this webcast.
Okay, and Laura, in summary, what is the report? What is your conclusion after your audit?
Okay. What we found was that the controls that were set up by the two schools that NSF audited were, as Gil mentioned, George Mason and Michigan Tech. So I'm going to focus my discussion on those 2 schools. But the systems were set up very well. They had good internal controls and policies and procedures, definitely well documented to cover the pilot. There was a good transition timeline that as of this date, the schools were working under the new pilot. Some of the issues that we found were that as very familiar to auditors over the course of looking at time and effort certification, is that the certifications were not done timely. So that has always been a challenge for folks to get done. Another one, probably more important from an internal control standpoint, was that the reconciliations were either not done or not done timely. So the fact that those reconciliations really support the annual certification by the PI really causes concern for auditors that the costs are not monitored during the year. And then the last thing that we found, again, this is very similar to under the old requirement of the old cost circulars, was that the universities weren't following their own policies and procedures.
Okay, as a matter of fact, thanks, Laura. George Mason, we have invited George Mason to come to our panel as well, but he's not available. Michael Laskowski, the Associate Vice President for Research Operation at George Mason, which you dealt with
I did.
In the reviews, had sent like a summary. I asked him what was the benefit, what his thought was, and he's basically say 3 things. Under this new way of documenting salaries and wages, there are significant reduction in administrative burden. He gave an example, or not example, but the fact that instead of having 1,203 certifier, he now have only 223 certified for the whole university. Instead of having to file 2,700 report, now he's filing about 487 payroll certifications. So you can see right away that is a big reduction in burden, for the university. The concept for him to explain to faculty and administrators is also very easy. So the training is better, he say. And with limited resource that they have, they can redirect some of their resource to more value-added tasks, just like doing research. So what is from the IG perspective, what is your advice to recipient on this subject in terms of when they want to set up a new effort reporting system?
Well, I would suggest maybe 4 things to keep in mind. The first is, as Gil mentioned earlier in this session, you're not required to change your system. You should look at your current system, you should look at the uniform guidance, and if you determine that it's in the best interest of your institution from a risk standpoint to change your system, then go ahead and do it. If you decide that from a risk standpoint it doesn't make sense to change it, then you're not required to. But whatever that decision is, I would suggest that it be documented. You would also need to document the policies and procedures under the new system, and document the timing of the change. If you're going to change over at the beginning of a fiscal year, I would document that. If you're going to, especially if you're going to change over in the middle of a fiscal year, document that so that the auditors know which criteria to look at these certifications when they come in to do the audit each year. And the last thing I would say is whatever system you determine is in the best interest of your institution, to follow that system. With the uniform guidance being so much more internal controls based versus compliance based, the auditors who come in are going to be looking at your policies and procedures because every institution is probably going to set up their system a little bit differently. So, we're going to be, or the auditors are going to be looking at what you decided is in your best interest and then whether you are following that guidance.
Thanks, Laura, and also thanks, Mike, for providing us, those summary notes. In closing, it sounds like from what you say, Laura, is In this area, you need to be bold, think outside the box, start early, in implementing, and most of all, communicating with all the stakeholders in this area, in-house, agency, and auditor to make a successful project.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.